The message came while I was standing in the tailor's fitting room, staring at myself in a mirror that suddenly felt hostile. My phone buzzed once in my hand, just one vibration. Short, polite, like what it carried wasn't about to split my life in half. We need to cancel the wedding. This isn't working. I'm sorry. That was it. No call, no explanation, no warning. Just 12 words from the woman I'd helped raise since she was 11 years old. The woman who, 2 weeks earlier, had hugged me and said, "I'm so glad you'll finally be part of the family for real." I remember thinking, absurdly, that the tailor was still waiting outside the curtain, that any second he'd ask if the sleeves felt right. I remember the smell of steam and fabric and chalk dust. Normal things, small things, things that belonged to a life where people didn't erase you with a text. I read the message again, then a third time. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I felt hollow instead, like someone had scooped something out of my chest and left the space clean and echoing. I walked out of the fitting room and told the tailor I wouldn't need the suit after all. He nodded, already moving on. No drama, no questions, just business. That was the theme of the day. Everyone else kept moving. By the time I got home, the cancellation had already spread. I could tell because my phone wouldn't stop lighting up, but I didn't answer any of it. Not her, not my fiance, not my wife's sister. I sat at the kitchen table and listened to the house hum around me, appliances doing their jobs without emotion. An hour later, she showed up in person. My stepdaughter stood in my doorway with her arms crossed, jaw set, already defensive. She didn't look sad, she looked resolved, like someone who'd made a difficult but necessary decision and wanted credit for it. "I didn't want to do this over text," she said, "but you weren't answering." I nodded once. "You canceled my wedding." She flinched, just a little. "Our wedding," she corrected automatically, then sighed. "Look, this is hard for me too." I waited. Silence has always been my strongest tool. People rush to fill it. "This whole thing," she continued, gesturing vaguely, "it just doesn't feel right anymore. The optics are bad." That word. Optics. Like we were discussing a brand deal, not a marriage. "The optics of what?" I asked. She hesitated. "Of you, of us, of how it looks to other people." There it was. Clean, clinical, final. She explained it carefully, the way you explain something unpleasant to someone you think won't fully understand. Her friends felt it was weird. Her biological father's side of the family was uncomfortable. There were questions about why I was so involved, why I was paying for so much, why I was always there. "They think you're controlling," she said. I almost laughed, almost. "I thought it would be easier if we just stopped this before it got worse," she finished. "No big scene, no mess." No mess. As if she hadn't just dropped a match into my life and walked away. I looked at her and realized something chillingly clear. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of being embarrassed by me. I asked one question, just one. "Did you talk to your mother about this?" She nodded. "She understands." That hurt more than the cancellation itself. I stood up slowly and she tensed, as if expecting an outburst. There wasn't one. "Okay," I said. She blinked. "Okay?" "Yes, okay." She frowned, confused by the lack of resistance. "You're not upset?" I met her eyes. "I'm very upset. I'm just not going to perform it for you." She left shortly after that, clearly unsettled. She wanted tears, anger, bargaining, something she could point to and say, "See, this is why." I gave her nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was spiraling, but because my mind was unusually quiet. When the noise finally drops away, you can hear the truth. And the truth was simple. For years, I had been necessary, useful, convenient, but I had never been essential. The wedding wasn't the first thing she took from me. It was just the first thing she took openly. When morning came, I made coffee, sat down at the same kitchen table, and opened my laptop. Not to beg, not to argue, to look. Because before anyone cancels your place in their life, they should be very sure they know what they're standing on. The house felt different the next morning. Not quieter, emptier, like it was holding its breath, waiting to see what kind of man I would be now that I'd been quietly dismissed from the role I'd been playing. I made breakfast out of habit: eggs, toast, coffee. I ate standing up, staring out the window, watching a delivery truck idle across the street. Life continued with insulting normalcy. At 9 sharp, my phone rang. Her mother. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hi," she said too softly. "I heard you're taking this hard." Interesting choice of words. Not, "I'm sorry," not, "Are you okay?" Just an assessment. "I'm fine," I said. A pause. She didn't believe me. People rarely do when you don't react the way they expect. "She didn't mean to hurt you," my wife continued. "She's under a lot of pressure. Wedding planning brings out the worst in people." "The wedding is canceled," I said. "There's nothing to plan." Another pause, longer this time. "She just needs space." I looked around the kitchen, the renovated cabinets I paid for, the appliances I replaced, the dining table I'd refinished myself because she liked the look of reclaimed wood, but not the price. "She's had space for years," I said. "I was just paying for it." Silence on the other end. Heavy, uncomfortable. "That's not fair," she said finally. "I know," I replied. "It's accurate." She hung up shortly after, not angrily. More like someone backing away from a conversation they weren't equipped to win. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. I went upstairs to my office and opened the filing cabinet I hadn't touched in a long time. The one labeled Household. Inside were folders thick with paper. Most people never think about until it's gone. Tuition payments, rent transfers, insurance policies, car notes, business loans she'd needed, just until things took off. Plane tickets, medical bills, emergency wires sent at midnight with no questions asked. I wasn't angry as I went through them. That surprised me too. I felt like an accountant auditing a life I'd subsidized without ever being asked to sit at the table. I added things up slowly, not to scare myself, to understand. Every time she'd said, "I'll pay you back," and I'd said, "Don't worry about it." Every time she'd said, "You're the only one I can count on." Every time she'd said, "I couldn't do this without you." She hadn't been lying. She'd just assumed it would never stop. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. This time, a message. "I think you're being really unfair. Canceling everything just because your feelings are hurt is extreme." I read it twice. Then I checked my bank app. The automatic transfers I'd set up years ago were still there, humming along quietly, doing their job. Rent, utilities, storage unit, credit card minimums. Small monthly sacrifices that had added up to a lifestyle she believed she'd built herself. I didn't cancel anything yet. Instead, I turned off my phone and went for a walk. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, the kind that clears your head whether you want it to or not. I passed couples, dogs, kids on scooters, people who belonged somewhere without having to justify it. I thought about the word she'd used: optics. I'd never cared about optics. I cared about responsibility, about showing up, about solving problems quietly so other people could feel secure. But optics care about something else entirely. They care about who gets credit. When I came back, there was an email waiting for me. From the venue, polite, professional, confirming the cancellation and outlining the refund timeline. My card was on file. I stared at the number for a long time. Then I forwarded the email. To her. No message, no commentary, just facts. A few minutes later, my phone exploded. Calls, messages, missed calls, stacked on missed calls. I didn't answer, because this was the moment I understood something important. Up until now, she thought she'd canceled a wedding. She hadn't realized she'd canceled the arrangement, and arrangements, once noticed, don't quietly go back to the way they were. I didn't cut anything off that day. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to see how long it would take before panic replaced confidence. It took less than 24 hours. By the next morning, my phone showed 7 missed calls from her and 3 from her mother. The tone had shifted. Less accusation, more urgency. That always happens when people sense the floor might not be as solid as they thought. I still didn't respond. Instead, I went back to the office and kept going through the paperwork, slowly, methodically, like a man inventorying a house before a storm. There was the apartment lease in her name, co-signed by me. I remembered standing in that leasing office years ago while she scrolled on her phone, bored, trusting me to handle it. There was the car loan I'd refinanced when her interest rate spiked, the credit card I'd temporarily added her to, the business account I'd quietly topped up every time it dipped too low. I wasn't listed as her father on anything. No titles, no recognition, just signatures. I realized something then that made my chest tighten, not with anger, but with clarity. If I disappeared tomorrow, there would be no ceremony, no acknowledgement. But there would be consequences, immediate ones. Around noon, my phone rang again. I answered this time. "What is going on?" she demanded. No greeting, no hesitation. "The venue says the refund is going back to you." "Yes," I said. "That money was already allocated." "I know. For deposits, vendors, planning." "I know." A sharp exhale. "You can't just take it." "I didn't take anything. I paid for it. It returned to the original source." She laughed, but there was a crack in it. "You're being petty." I leaned back in my chair and looked at the stack of papers on my desk. Years of generosity disguised as normalcy. "Petty would be asking for reimbursement," I said. "I'm not doing that." There was a pause. Then her voice softened, just slightly. "You're punishing me." "No," I replied. "I'm correcting an assumption." Her tone hardened again. "So what, you're just going to cut me off?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, but because this part mattered. "I'm going to stop pretending I'm invisible," I said finally. "That's all." She scoffed. "You're overreacting." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm also done." She hung up on me. That afternoon, her mother came home early. I heard the door before I saw her. She walked into the office without knocking, eyes already glossy, emotions loaded and ready. "She's beside herself," she said. "You didn't have to go this far." "Far?" I asked. I forwarded an email. "You know what I mean?" she snapped. "You're destabilizing her." I gestured to the folders on my desk. "This is stability." I provided it quietly, consistently, for years. She stared at the papers like they offended her. "You're throwing money in her face." "No," I said calmly. She did that the moment she decided I was an optics problem. That landed. I could tell by the way her mouth tightened. She didn't mean it like that. Then how did she mean it? Silence. I stood up and closed the filing cabinet. The sound echoed louder than I expected. "I'm not angry," I said, "but I am finished funding a life where my presence is negotiable." Her eyes widened. "You wouldn't." "I already am," I replied. That night, I logged into every account I was attached to and removed myself. One by one, cleanly, legally, no theatrics. I didn't send a message. I didn't announce it. I just stopped being the quiet engine under a car she insisted she built herself. When I finally lay down to sleep, my phone buzzed again. A text. "You're ruining everything." I stared at it in the dark and felt something unexpected. Relief. Because for the first time, the consequences were no longer abstract. They were starting to arrive. The first payment failed on Thursday morning. I know because she called me before the bank even finished sending the notification. "What did you do?" she asked, breathless now. No anger left, just panic stripped bare. "I stopped," I said. "Stopped what?" "Covering things that aren't mine." Her voice rose. "My rent didn't go through?" "Yes." "You knew that was due today?" "Yes." A long silence, then, "So, this is it? You're just abandoning me." That word. Abandoning, as if she hadn't spent years pushing me to the edge and calling it independence. "I didn't disappear," I said. "I stepped back." "There's a difference." "You can't do this all at once," she said quickly. "You're putting me in a position." I almost smiled at that. Positions were something I understood very well. I'd held one for years without complaint. "I held you up for a long time," I replied. "You're just noticing because your feet touch the ground." She started crying then. Real crying. Not the strategic kind. The sound was sharp, uncontrolled. "I don't have time for this," she said between breaths. "I have responsibilities, work, a life." "So do I said. She hung up. By the afternoon, the messages changed tone again. Apologies started slipping in between accusations. "I didn't mean what I said. You know I love you. You're taking this too far. Love always seems to appear right around the time money disappears." Her mother tried again that evening. Softer this time. Measured. "She's under a lot of stress," she said, "and this is snowballing." "It's revealing," I corrected. "You're teaching her a lesson," she said carefully. "But do you really need to go this far?" I looked around the house. The silence felt earned now, not empty. "I'm not teaching anything," I said. "I'm opting out." She exhaled. "You're being cold." "No," I replied. "I'm being accurate." That night, I received an email from her landlord. Polite, direct, asking if I was still a guarantor on the lease. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. "No," I wrote, "I am not." I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, the panic turned to anger again. She showed up unannounced, eyes red, jaw tight, moving through the house like she still had a claim to it. "You blindsided me," she said. "This is cruel." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. "I warned you," I said. "You just didn't think I meant myself." She laughed bitterly. "So what? I'm supposed to figure everything out overnight?" "That's what independence is," I said. Sudden, unforgiving, honest. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Not as a resource, not as background, as a boundary. "This isn't over," she said. I nodded. "No, it isn't." But as she walked out, slamming the door behind her, I understood something important. She still thought this was a fight. It wasn't. It was an exit. She changed tactics on day 3. When fear didn't work and anger burned out too fast, she reached for something older, something she knew had always pulled me back into place. "Guilt. I don't recognize you anymore," she wrote. "You used to care about family." I read that message while sitting at the kitchen table, sunlight cutting across the wood in a clean line. I didn't answer. I'd learned that guilt needs an audience. Without one, it collapses under its own weight. An hour later, her mother came over again. She didn't knock this time. She never did when she thought she was right. "You're enjoying this," she accused the moment she saw me. "I can see it." I shook my head. "You're mistaking calm for pleasure." "She's barely holding it together," she said. "Her credit cards are maxed. Her landlord is threatening late fees. People are starting to ask questions." "Good," I said before I could stop myself. She froze. "Good?" "Yes," I repeated. "Because for the first time, the questions are being asked in the right direction." She stared at me like I'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "You're her father," she said. "Oh, or you were. You don't just stop." That landed harder than anything else she'd said. "I was never her father," I replied. "I was the infrastructure. And infrastructure only matters when it fails." Her mouth opened, then closed. No argument came. Just the quiet realization that something fundamental had shifted. That afternoon, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was her biological father. We hadn't spoken in years. Not since the last time he'd promised to step up and disappeared again. "I hear things are rough," he said, voice thick with false concern. "She's stressed." I almost laughed. "Then it's your turn," I said. A pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're her father," I replied. "You should help." He cleared his throat. "I'm not in a position right now." Of course he wasn't. "Neither am I said and ended the call. That night, she sent one final message. Longer this time. Carefully written. "I know I hurt you. I know I said things I shouldn't have. But you're taking everything away. I didn't mean to erase you. I just needed space. Please don't do this." I read it slowly. Then I typed my reply. I didn't take anything away. I stopped giving what was never owed. Space works both ways. I didn't block her. I didn't mute the conversation. I just stopped responding. And that was when it finally hit her. Not in words, not in accusations, in silence. This wasn't about punishment. It was about the sudden, irreversible understanding that the life she'd been living had been borrowed, and the lender had closed the account. The collapse wasn't dramatic. No single explosion, no final scream. It came in small, humiliating increments. First, she lost the apartment. Not immediately. At first, there were warnings, late notices, thinly veiled threats wrapped in polite language. Then one morning, she called me from her car, voice flat, asking if she could leave some boxes in the garage for a few days. I said no. That was the moment something in her broke. After that, the call stopped. For a while. Silence again, but this time, it wasn't chosen. It was survival mode. Scrambling. Calculating. Reaching out to people she'd ignored while she thought the ground beneath her was permanent. I heard about it through others. A friend mentioned she was between places. Another said she was reassessing priorities. Her mother said nothing at all, which told me more than words ever could. I focused on my own life, or tried to. The strange thing was how little space she'd actually left behind once the financial noise disappeared. The house ran just fine without the constant emergencies. My days were quieter, cleaner. I started sleeping through the night. Then one evening, she showed up again. No anger this time, no performance, just exhaustion. She stood in the doorway, thinner, eyes dulled, pride worn down to the bone. I didn't know it was this much, she said. I didn't invite her in. Much of what? I asked. All of it, she replied. The money, the timing, the way everything just stops. I nodded once. That's how support works. You only feel it when it's gone. She swallowed. I thought I earned my life. That's what you were told, I said. By people who needed you to believe it. She looked at me then, not with resentment, but with something closer to fear. I can't fix this on my own, she said quietly. I believed her, but belief didn't change my answer. You're going to have to, I replied. Her eyes filled, but the tears didn't fall. She was past that stage now. I made a mistake, she said. I shouldn't have canceled the wedding. I studied her face. The desperation, the calculation behind it. That wasn't the mistake, I said. That was the reveal. She flinched. The mistake, I continued, was thinking you could remove me without removing the consequences of my presence. She nodded slowly. For the first time, she didn't argue. I need help, she whispered. I stepped back and closed the door. Not hard, not angrily, gently. Because by then, the lesson was complete. She wasn't being punished. She was being introduced to reality without a buffer. She waited 2 weeks before trying again, not with calls, not with messages. She sent an email. Formal, careful, structured like a proposal. Apologies placed strategically. Responsibility acknowledged just enough to sound sincere, without going too deep. She wrote about growth, about perspective, about how everything falling apart had helped her see things more clearly. At the end, she asked to meet. I agreed. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I wanted closure that didn't leave room for reinterpretation later. We met in a quiet cafe halfway between our neighborhoods. Neutral ground. She arrived early. I arrived on time. She stood when she saw me, unsure whether to hug me, then sat back down when I didn't move. She looked older, not wiser, just worn. I know I handled things badly, she began. I was overwhelmed. People were in my ear. I let it affect my judgment. I let her talk. She explained how hard things had been, how she'd miscalculated, how she never meant to hurt me, only to set boundaries. She said the word twice, like it had become part of her vocabulary recently. I see now how much you did, she said. I took it for granted. That's not awareness, I replied calmly. That's inventory. She winced. I'm not asking for things to go back to how they were, she said quickly. I just need help stabilizing. Temporarily. There it was. The core request, stripped of the decoration. I folded my hands on the table. If I help you now, what changes? She hesitated. Too long. I'd be grateful, she said finally. I nodded. Gratitude is an emotion. I'm talking about structure. Her eyes darted away. She didn't have an answer. Here's the truth, I said. You didn't cancel my wedding. You canceled your access to me. That's not fair, she said weakly. It's precise, I replied. She leaned forward, voice dropping. You're really going to let me fail? I looked at her and felt nothing like triumph. Just finality. I already saved you, I said. For years. You just don't remember it that way because it felt like air. She sat back, tears finally spilling, not loudly, quietly, like someone who knew there was no appeal left. "I'm sorry," she said. "I really am." "I know," I replied. "But apologies don't rebuild systems. Accountability does." We finished our coffee in silence. When we stood to leave, she looked at me one last time, searching, hoping. I didn't give her anything to hold on to, because some lessons only stick when there's nothing left to cushion them. I heard about her a few months later from someone who didn't know the whole story. "She's doing better," they said carefully. "Working more, living smaller, realizing things." I nodded and changed the subject. By then, my life had settled into something quieter and more honest. The wedding never happened. Neither did the version of myself that was willing to be tolerated as long as I was useful. I sold the house, downsized, cut my expenses to match my actual needs, not someone else's ambitions. The money wasn't the point anymore. The clarity was. One afternoon, a letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. Inside, a single page. She didn't ask for anything this time. No help, no forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. She wrote that she finally understood what it meant to stand on her own, that she'd blamed me because it was easier than facing the truth, that she knew now the life she thought she'd earned had been financed by someone she treated as optional. "I don't expect a response," she ended. "I just needed you to know I see it now." I folded the letter and put it away. I didn't write back, not out of spite, not out of anger, but because the story was finished. Some relationships aren't meant to be repaired. They're meant to be understood. Too late, usually, by one side. I didn't get revenge in the way people imagine it. There was no shouting match, no public reckoning, no moment where I got to watch her beg. I simply stopped lying about my value. And when I did, everything built on that lie collapsed on its own. That was the cost. And also, finally, the freedom.